All right, let's look at the qualities of wise men. I'm going to go shut this door. Right. So let's look at this particular chapter. This is the qualities of wise men. It's my page 73, and it's your page 81. 81. So this entire chapter involves becoming wise and what we need to recognize. And this one has been so interesting to me. It ends with growing in wisdom, which is later, and how we're going to grow in wisdom and what might hinder us from that growth. So number one, regarding the qualities of wise men, he calls it the G factor, the general factor of intelligence. That's what we have on this particular page. Examining all that Solomon said about the wise reveals this general mentality. So what's involved in the general factor of intelligence, spiritually speaking? So what's involved in that? Well, number one, he points out that you be cautious what you receive. Be cautious what you ingest. There's so much out there, and there's so much information, there's so much material, and we are so frequently incautious about how we ingest something, and then we kind of let things go, whether it be in the media or movies or whatever it may be. But Solomon tells us, you better be cautious about what you ingest. Why would that be so important? So as I had one preacher tell us one time, and he was talking about rock music. This is when I was at Oklahoma Christian. He said, G-I-G-O, garbage in, garbage out. And this is what's about. And that's exactly what you mentioned, Kelly, and that is what you ingest helps you become exactly what that is, and it also spills out, and that's what happens to us. So let's look what Solomon had to say regarding, he told us about this long ago. This is Proverbs chapter 14, 15, and 16. If you're in the Bible, chapter 14, 15, and 16. It's also on your page. The prudent man looks well to his going, and a wise man sees evil coming and avoids it. What I really like about this passage is the long-range view of what wisdom is able to give people. As young people, we're not able to see all the long-range consequences of mistakes that we make or choices that we choose. But as you grow older and you can see, and sometimes unfortunately, you experience those long-range consequences, you're able to see things developing before they develop. Isn't that a great way to be? I think in horse training, they would say, I remember Pat Pirelli would always say, a good horse trainer is one who knows what's going to happen before what happens. You have to know what's going to happen before what happens. That's why he put it. I thought, okay, let's think about that for a moment. But you have to know, okay, this situation is going to explode that horse, or this situation is going to be dangerous for you. And you need to recognize those situations instead of just kind of lollygagging around and just kind of, okay, and then falling into a particular situation and then you're in trouble. Well, that's exactly what we have here. And that is we're able to see a little bit with long-range consequences what may take place. Does that make sense, David? So that's what a wise man is all about. Then we have this passage, Proverbs 19 and 2. 19 and 2. He who acts hastily blunders. This is from the New American Bible. He who acts hastily. How does your Bible read in that one? He who acts hastily blunders. Just too quick to act. Say again. Or his feet misses the way. You act too quickly, your feet miss the way. Or in this one, 22 and 3. I like this one because this gives us the sense of foresight. 22 and 3. A prudent man foresees the evil and he hides himself. He hides himself. He sees evil coming. That is to say, you can see evil coming a long way off. What I really appreciate about this, I'm just going to say this, and I don't normally like to brag about my family, but I have family. Well, Todd's mother, Linda, my mother, Mary Sue, my Aunt Jo, they had their finger on the pulse of the cultural movements in our country from my grandmother Pearl all the way back. So I'll say this, and I don't want to offend anybody by this, but my grandmother Pearl grew up in Oklahoma she was born in 1900. And she was, of course, everybody in those days were Democrats. She studied her way out of the Democrat Party. She said, there's something wrong here. She studied her way out of it. That was back in the 1920s. She recognized the long-range consequences of some of the positions that the Democrat Party was taking. She said, this is not right. This is not constitutional. It's not really foundational to what we have in our country. And I think that's what we need to have, and that is more long-range vision about things that happen now, or our decisions that we make now, or policies that we put into place now. Now, I say all of that, people say, wow, I thought, everybody was great, the Democrat Party, all the way up to the 1960s. No, not really. Not really. No, the principles of totalitarianism were already laid in Woodrow Wilson's period. Now, I say all of that simply illustrative of long-range consequences that people need to be able to see from things that are occurring now. So nowadays, if we go back and read material regarding Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, you'll see, oh, okay, yeah, he was basically a socialist. But we just ingested all of his material. FDR, socialist. He had communists who were in his cabinet, people that were friends with communists, and he was warned. He said, you know what, don't pay attention to that. This was all FDR, but everybody knew one thing. He was going to give a chicken in every pot, and that's all they cared about. And so the long-range consequences now we are seeing in our society, right? Isn't that how it was? Chicken in every pot. Well, what happened, we strayed from our principles of the Bible, or of the Constitution. The same thing happens with biblical principles. So we stray from those principles, and it's easy to stray, but we can't see necessarily the long-range consequences unless we're really paying attention. So sometimes I say to Nita, and I said, well, I remember my grandmother would say, this is coming right here. She told us in the 1960s, she said, your problem is going to be with Islam. I thought, what? What are we talking about? So your problem is going to be with Islam. Well, okay, Grandma. Well, that's what we got. That's what we have here. But, well, so that's right. Anyway, we had those kind of comments. I could illustrate all day long. But the point is not to be offensive to political parties, but simply to point out that that's what Solomon's talking about, having a long-range view of positions that we take today. All right, comments. So this is how he puts it in Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 1. Dead flies make the perfumous ointment give off an evil odor, and a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. Let's weigh that for a moment. A little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. Why is that the case? That's correct. One mistake. We sing the songs about angry words, and you can destroy a relationship with just several angry words spoken in a moment. And that's hard for people to get over sometimes when those angry words are spoken. So sometimes momentary mistakes, okay, I shouldn't have said that, but boy, that hurts, doesn't it? That hurts. So here we have the next one. This is we'll look at this one, and this is Proverbs 11 and 12. We'll go chapter 11, we'll look at chapter 12, chapter 14, and this is about emotional control. I like this one, emotional control. All right, let's look at 11 and 12. One of you take that and read that if you will. If you have it, I've kind of jumped around. Go ahead. 11, chapter 11, verse 12. Man of understanding keeps quiet. Oh, what about the common mantra that says, well, he's honest and he says what's in his mind? I will speak my truth and you believe in your truth. Well, what is that? That is folly. That is opposite of wisdom. Isn't it great how Solomon puts it for us? Shut your mouth. We would put it that way. Let's try another one. This is 12 and 16. Chapter 12 and verse 16. Someone else take off on that one. I have a translation here that is on this page. Moffat's translation is pretty interesting, but I'll see how the King James or the ASV or whatever you're using reads it. That's how I have it. Prudent man ignores an insult. Very challenging to do, isn't it? Difficult. Ignore the insult. That is something that our society is not very adept at doing. Not only that, I don't normally get on Facebook. And I think, because it's not edifying. Most of it's not edifying. A lot of it's gossipy. And so, but I was waiting for Anita yesterday, and so I thought, well, I just opened it up and said, and they have all these videos of these people fighting all over, people fighting. Girls getting into these fights, pulling hair, dragging each other around. I thought, and this is what they like to watch. They love to, so I said, okay, turn this off. That's just so unedifying, so inglorious. I don't want, but that's what we just have a diet of this stuff, and people watch this over and over and over again, and people popping off and saying ugly things, and so now that's becoming commonplace. But here we have, ignore an insult. Don't be getting into it just because someone insults you. 14 and 29, let's try that one. Oh, yeah, there it is. Folly, quick-tempered folly, but the man who is slow to wrath is a great understanding. Sometimes I have to hold it, but you want to get angry about things sometimes. I told you about my neighbor went and shoot my dog recently. I thought, yeah, oh yeah. Well, yeah. I told that story last week, and Lee said, what? Well, but anyway, Foxy went over there, was kind of bouncing around on the fence line, and their little dogs ran out into the road, and their little dog, and she chased it. Well, he was driving out of the driveway, and he came back, and hollering at me, I'm going to shoot your dog, I'm going to shoot your dog, ah! And he was cursing, using the F word all over the place. And I finally said, hi, you're not going to shoot my dog. I thought, okay. So I apologized to him later for popping off like that. And matter of fact, the other day, I was over there. I didn't tell you the rest of the story. I was over there the other day. I had a calf get through the fence. And so I asked him, I said, his name is Christopher, he's a young guy. And I said, well, just wonder if you stand over there and make sure this calf doesn't run that way. And I said, by the way, Christopher, I want to apologize for having the altercation with you the other day. He said, no, it's my fault. He was just all apologetic. He said, I want to talk to you. I said, it was my fault. I should not have cursed at you like that. And I said, well, it's okay. I said, I've had students do the same thing. So anyway, the point is, slow to wrath, great understanding. Proverbs 20 and verse 3. Let's look at that one. Proverbs 20 and 3. Oh, it's such a good text right here. What is an honor for a man? Stop striving. And also, here's how the RSV puts it. Keep aloof from strife. Sometimes people are almost like magnets gravitating towards strife. They like, okay, we got something going on over here. Let me get into it here. And pretty soon everybody's embroiled in something, and just keep aloof from strife. And that's what Solomon has to do. There it is. Same thing. Yeah. Well, we all have things to work on. Sure. We would hope that we all do, not just you. Okay. Did you hear that, Ann? Dave says she got me anyway. She said, misery loves company, and there they are right there. A miserable couple. By the way, that reminds me, did anyone have the bulletin article this week right in front of them? That's kind of, let me see. Yeah. So this is, I saw this in the Epic Times, as you can see. I quoted that passage, or an article. The science of complaining, how it harms your brain. And it's a self-revolving cycle that causes you to have a different perception of the world if you're on a constant complaining kick. Some people are always in the complaining mood, or I should say the complaining case and the kickative mood. And that's how I would have professors say it, the complaining case and the kickative mood. And it just becomes habitual. Some people are always grumpy, always fussy, always, see, but now don't elbow Dave. she, she elbowed him pretty good right there. But the signs of complaining is it's a self-revolving cycle. It causes you to perceive the world differently. Number two, it doesn't resolve problems. It actually creates more problems because of your perception. And then number three is that chronic negative thinking about people or situations is linked to more rapid declines in cognition and memory. That's interesting. Wow. And then number four, the effects of habitual complaining extend beyond the brain itself. It goes into the social atmosphere. People say, you know, I'll go out the back door. I don't want to visit with Bill. He's just always complaining about something. He's always have something negative to say. So I think, here's what I'd like you to think. And I try to do it this way. All right, this conversation I'm having now, is it positive or negative? Am I dominating the conversation or am I listening? How is this conversation going? And when I walk away, sometimes I think, well, I talk too much. I talk 90% of the time, that person talked 10. That's, okay, that means what? Next time they see me coming, they're going to say, no, I'll go this way. And that's what happens, right? So I don't want to be that way. But anyway, that's thinking about that on the bulletin article. Okay, there we go. Let's look at the next one, and that is that we live successfully by knowledge. When we use it, we have to utilize the knowledge successfully. This is Proverbs chapter 9, verses 8 and 9. Or chapter 10 and verse 8, a wise in heart will receive commandments. Or the wise men lay up knowledge, Proverbs 10:14. The wise man listens to advice, chapter 12, verse 15. Let's go to 13 and 1. A wise son hears his father's instructions. Hears means acknowledges and pays attention to and wants to follow those instructions. Or with those who take advice is wisdom. Sometimes we don't like to take advice, but there's one that tells us we need to. He that fears the commandment shall be rewarded. Boy, there's something we don't have much anymore of today. Fearing the commandments of God. Proverbs 13 and 13. In chapter 13, we're in verse 16. Look at verse 16. Every prudent man works with knowledge. Or chapter 14 and verse 8. We're just kind of bouncing along here. So just go to the next chapter. The wisdom of the prudent is to understand his way. One chapter later, chapter 15, verse 14. The mind of him who has understanding seeks knowledge. That is, we continue to seek knowledge. So the whole point of this is successful living involves not only avoiding certain things and having a mind that is going to avoid ingesting everything and also avoids speaking out everything and just popping off the valve, but also going to continue to learn. And that's what that article is all about. If we're going to be people who continue to learn, you have to learn and you have to practice it. I have young people in my Bible class, and I had to memorize Ephesians 6, verses 10 through 18. But they have never memorized anything at all. Now I said, well, you can't have a more difficult, challenging time to memorize than I do. I know that because I have blood, sweat, and tears with it. And it takes me a long, long, long time to memorize anything. That's why I start. People say, well, how long take you? Well, David asked a question. How long take you to get the lesson up? Well, I started memorizing the book, let's say Philippians, a year ago. I start about a year ago. And then I kind of, okay, now I start feeling it. And I kind of go through it, and I thought, okay, so now I start being able to sit, but it's just forever. But young people today say, well, I can't memorize. I can't memorize. I said, what do you mean? So I said, well, it's going for you for a grade. And they're memorizing. This is a grade for your final. And they're memorizing. But the point is, we have to actually train our minds to learn and to ingest more material. And we do that particularly with God's godly material. And that's what's so good about it. So we train our minds to learn it. And that's what this is all about. So that's what we have in the next line here. A man's wisdom increases. As it increases, he becomes more able, and he increasingly enjoys the process. It increases your capacity to learn more. How does that? Now, why is that the case? Psychologically speaking, why is that? I guess that's correct. I don't know the scientific explanation for it, but that's as good as any. Yes, ma'am. Correct. You don't use it, you lose it. But if you use it and you try to gain more, then you're able to learn more, and your capacity actually increases. So here's how Solomon puts it. This is chapter 10, verse 23. So let's go to 10, and then we'll go to chapter 14. We'll have 3 texts in chapter 14. Chapter 10. This is 10 and 23. Who wants to read that one? This is interesting. 10 and 23 of Proverbs. Delight in wisdom. I think the ASV has, it's as a sport. It's something you enjoy. You enjoy. Wisdom is a pleasure. Becomes something pleasurable to you. Anybody else have the ASV besides me? I didn't bring my ASV, Old Testament. I have ESV. What's yours say, Nita? A sport. Yeah, it's a sport. It becomes a pleasurable thing to us when we are learning. But how does that come about? I have so many people tell me, I don't like to read. Well, you know how you learn to read and how you learn to like it? Do it. Do it. Yeah, certainly so. And you increase your ability to. Everybody loves to read. I know some men say, well, I've had some men say, I don't like to read. Well, when it comes to putting together that engine over there, you've read all the instructions on it. Or if you're going to be a pilot, Randy, you're going to read the instruction books. And you can say, well, I don't like to read. Well, you're going to read a great big book about how to fly a plane. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you know what? There's a lot of material I go through. It's like, this is kind of boring, and but I have to plow through it sometimes anyway. Yes, sir, Todd. Right. You know what? I'm going to say this about Todd. What a great Christian couple is this. And here's what Todd did. So we were speaking at a Christianity and Constitution seminar. Remember we had that seminar several years ago. And Todd said, I want to learn to speak better. So he went and joined a Toastmasters club. He became the president of the Toastmasters club, where they were forced to come up with talks, stand before a group of people, deliver a lecture, deliver a talk. And he just wanted to hone and get that skill, just hone fine-tuned and make it better. And he wanted to learn. And that's what it takes. It's just we have to actually press forward with it. So, way to do it, start. And that's how we need to do it. But that's what Solomon's all about here. So, so knowledge is easy for a man of understanding. That's chapter 14 and verse 6. Let's go to chapter 14. There's several of them here. So 14 and 6, knowledge is easy for a man of understanding. Now that's Revised Standard. What does yours say there, Nita? Yeah, knowledge is easy for the man who understands. Becomes more simple, doesn't it, Todd? That's how it becomes more, okay, I can ingest this. I can expand it, my knowledge. How about 14 and 18? Let's go to the same chapter, verse 18. Prudent or prudent? What's the prudent mean? I think that's a synonym for wise. Yeah, wise man, prudent man, a wise man. Wisdom, remember, is beginning with the fear of the Lord. That's the beginning of knowledge, or beginning of knowledge, and according to chapter 9, the beginning of wisdom. We have to have healthy respect for God's authority. That's the beginning of it. So a prudent man is crowned with knowledge. That shows you immediately that he is one or she is one who is expanding in the knowledge. And we, of course, primarily want to have knowledge of God's word. And that's what we're doing, expanding that. Chapter 14, verse 33. This is interesting. Wisdom is always spoken of in the feminine case. Wisdom, she cries aloud and says, "Come learn of me." That's chapter 8. Wisdom is always portrayed in the feminine case. Is there something to be said for that? Oh, yeah, grand lady wisdom. That's right. You never notice that? Well, yeah, that's right. So there we have it. And that's what we have here. In the discerning heart, wisdom finds a resting place. The discerning heart, wisdom. So wisdom calls. All right, now let's notice the next one, and that is your words, therefore. Okay, we've ingested things. We are wise. We exclude certain things, and then we tamp down our emotions. Now we get to one of the most difficult challenges that Solomon gives you. Your tongue or your mouth, your words. So your words reflect your mentality, whether they're controlled, knowledgeable, and effective, or whether they're uncontrolled, not speaking knowledge, and then they're ineffective. So let's go to chapter 10, verse 19. Your words reflect who you are. Boy, I tell you, this is so important. We do not recognize this. So we have many people say, well, you can't judge, can't judge, can't judge. Well, people show what they're about and what's in their heart by what they say. And that's what happens here. So 10 and 19, let's think about that. Some one of you pick that up. Steadfast in, now this is King James. What translation you, huh? This is, he that refrains his lips is wise. Refrain your lips. You're not a steam engine. You're not building up pressure and then have to pop a valve. That's what a lot of people think, that we're a steam engine and that we have pressure and then go let it out. But that is a self-devolving cycle that causes us to do worse and worse. Let's go to the next one. This is 12 and 23 of Proverbs. 12 and 23, and then we're going to go to chapter 14 and verse 3, so you might prepare for that one. Go ahead. Okay, we keep knowledge to ourselves. We're not so eager to say, I'm going to tell you what I know. I'm going to tell you what I know. That's not what we're about. We're wise. And so we have the next one, 14 and 3. Wise men's words are what? What does it say there in 14 and 3? Wise man's words are what? Okay, then the wise man's words are what? This one has his safeguard. His words are his safeguard. New English Bible. Safeguard. I don't know how your translation is. Preserves him. Yeah, preserves him. Protect him. Preserves him. Safeguards. Right. That's the idea. All right, then we have chapter 15 and 7. Lips of the wise spread knowledge. We're going to be giving positive and instructive and things that people think, well, that person's, they have some thoughts here that are actually valuable on this. That's what we want to be. Let's go to the next one. I love this one, chapter 16, verse 23. So in this translation, RSV, it says, the wise man's words are, he makes his speech judicious. Think about what we say before you say it. Judicious in our speech. That is pretty heavy, isn't it? Have to think about it. You're judicious in your speech, and we add persuasiveness to our lips. One other text, I'll read it here. This is Ecclesiastes 9 and 17. The words of the wise heard in quiet are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. So here's the overall picture. And this is what Walter Porter, how he sums it up. So he says, wise men hate evil. They have no appreciation for sensuousness. They look with distaste upon things that are wasteful and destructive. And he gives a lot of illustrations. For example, he says physicians who work in hospital emergency rooms or nurses, they become fanatics about washing your hands in cleanliness. They recognize the harmful effects of nastiness or germs, the germ warfare. Modern surgeons are fanatics about cleanliness. Anybody have seen this book, None of These Diseases? Anybody have that? You have that? That's a good book, isn't it? What do you remember about that book? Right, yeah. So he goes through, modern doctor says, the law of Moses, and he goes through a number of illustrations, I've forgotten which they are, have protected people from diseases all way before modern science came to the same type of conclusions. And those laws of Moses protected people, and that's what they're for. So the same thing regarding scientists. Scientists look with contempt, he says, upon careless research that produces false conclusions. I think about this, just for an illustration. I remember reading last year, or the year before, Lord Monckton, who was in Britain, one of the great British scientists, and he went to the United Nations meeting on climate change. And he said, you all are not doing science correctly at all. This is not scientifically established that it is man-caused climate change. And there are so many of them that spoke out in unison with him saying, this is not real science. You are fudging the numbers and you're pressing the statistics in order to get a political outcome. And Lord Monckton, they didn't even allow him to speak after he spoke for a while. They shut him down. They turned off his mic in the United Nations. They didn't want him to speak anymore. I thought now that is not scientific. Scientific would be, we'll hear both sides, we'll weigh both sides of it, we'll come to some judicious conclusion. But they don't do that. And so Lord Monckton, this is an illustration, he said, you know, this is not science. Go ahead, Todd. Yeah. Well, for example, the rocket that, like was in the 1980s that blew up, I don't remember the details of the details, that small O-ring that it had overlooked, or they did not really properly test or something. I don't remember what it was. Is that what it was? And so there's an illustration of what Todd's talking about. But exactly the point. Pay attention to detail, and engineers have to do that. Otherwise, the rocket will blow up, the bridge will collapse, or the waterway will spill over, something, if you don't pay attention to the details. So I was talking with Scott the other day about some of the things that you were doing in Houston. So Todd was down there in Houston recently doing, I think it's an engineering feat, but anyway, I'll have to let him tell you about it, the light show that they had with drones and so forth. So I was telling Scott about it, and he said, those engineers, they're the ones who really know what's going on. He says, when we fly the planes, he said, the engineers, they work out all the mathematics and the scientific formulas about everything, and we just have to follow what they say. And so in other words, if you drop your ordnance at this level, then it has to be, you have to, at this angle, it has to be this speed, and then here's when it has to detonate, and here's how you have to be out of the way because here's the pattern that's going to explode. All of that is worked out by the engineers, such as Todd, before, he said, and we have to get in there and we have to learn all that. And the man, he said, you talk about dry reading, but that's tough, but that's hard. He said, and so you know how that goes. And there are probably 1,001 things like that you have to know to fly. Just have to be paid attention to. So Scott, someone would ask him, was it fun to fly the A-10? He said, well, yeah, you could say that. It was fun sometimes, but he said it was work, studying all the time, big, thick books all the time. He said it was just a lot of work. But pay attention to detail, and that's really the point here of all of this. I want to conclude with this. In talking about our words, going back to the words for a moment, a wise man chooses his words carefully, speaks prudently. And I like this statement I read of Thomas Jefferson one time. He said, when people resort to foul language, he said that shows the lack of intelligence, it shows a limited vocabulary. They're not able to really express themselves correctly and wisely. And he was the one who just said, you know, be careful how you speak. We don't need to speak ugly language. Now, that was a founding father who, to my knowledge, was not a New Testament Christian, but he recognized the value of our words and how we should weigh what we say. Yes, ma'am. Well, they was probably picked that up from other people as well. I mean, he said, number one, we need to practice self-control, emotional self-control. And number two, he said, it comes out in your speech. And you need to learn a good vocabulary so that you're not resorting to ugly and foul language and gutter talk. He said, you need to learn to speak correctly. Right. Isn't it funny how children, they say a word and they almost sense that they know instinctively that I'm going to try this word. And you look at it, they know okay, they've transgressed. Oh boy. I don't know, maybe it's because of my reaction, but it seems like they instinctively know that they're going to try something here in the house that's heard at school. And it's like, okay, let's talk about this for a moment. All right, anything to conclude? All right, thank you for your participation.